Throughout history, freethinkers have outraged the religious with their wacky ideas about the virtues of free speech, reason, and, of course, eating babies. Now, God is dying, and it's time to dispose of his remains. From the pits of hell, Satan sends two puppets of the imperialist West and the Zionist Jews against God, Islam, and tiny kittens to bring you their propaganda and conspire for a new world order. This is Secular Jihadists for a Muslim Enlightenment with Ali Rizvi and Armin Navabi.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Secular Jihadists for a Muslim Enlightenment. My name is Ali Rizvi, and with me is Armin Navabi. Armin, hello, welcome back.
Hi.
And I'm saying welcome back to Armin because Armin just came back from a trip to the Holy Land. Armin went to Israel. He went to Palestine. He went to the West Bank. He went to Al-Aqsa Mosque. He went to the church where Christ was allegedly crucified.
Allegedly.
He was baptized. You were baptized, right? This is a teaser, by the way. We're not going to talk about this too much right now.
I wasn't just baptized. I did all three. I got baptized in the river where Jesus was allegedly baptized. I went to did the Sunni prayer and got the wuzu, the Sunni version of the wuzu, because I only knew the Shia one. I also did that, I forgot what it's called, the black ribbon around your arm and the cube on your head and the one next to your heart with the Jewish one. I did everything. I tried everything out.
Yeah.
Yeah,
that sounds like a lot of fun. Anyway, so you did that. You went to Ramallah. You went to so anyway, we're going to have a separate live stream where we're going to talk about his experience. You guys might have seen some of the photos online. Rizvi is saying nice photos with the IDF soldiers. Yeah, it was good.
Yeah, but that was a little bit embarrassing because I noticed I had the hover. What do you call it? The hover hand?
You had the hover hand.
Yeah, my God.
I saw that.
That was
I noticed that. I was like, Armin.
I should have just went right for it. Like, that's so... it's fine. Next time.
It's a little hard nowadays.
Yeah.
I know. So
actually, first of all, in my defense, the girls had guns, and also in the Me Too era, you don't know what's allowed and what's not allowed.
You don't know what's going to happen.
Okay.
Yeah. So, and especially in the Holy Land. So there's anyway, so we're gonna do another live stream on that soon, and because I know I wanted to. We've been talking about it for the last half hour off the air, and it's just incredible. And he went there with a previous guest on our podcast,
yes,
who was the genetically modified skeptic, Drew.
Yeah.
And I saw some of the footage, and it's like it just looks fucking incredible. So I can't wait for this stuff to come out. I don't think anybody has done this, like an ex-Muslim atheist and an ex-Christian atheist going into the Holy Land and basically getting into everything, every mosque, every church, just talking to people from across the spectrum. So to consider that a teaser for conversation, and all the footage is going to come next. Anyway, so today we're going to talk about something that's relevant at the time that we're recording this podcast, right? So what recently happened in New Zealand was there was an absolutely horrific terrorist attack that was in a mosque in Christchurch. So Christchurch, I think, has overall 3 mosques, and this gunman basically went into one of the mosques during Friday prayer time when it was super crowded, and just went like a video game, put a GoPro type camera on his head or wherever he put it, and you just saw he just went and he made a 16-minute video of just shooting down people indiscriminately inside the mosque, including children. There was a 3-year-old who was killed, a 4-year-old, members of the same family. It was just, the whole thing was just horrendous. And he also published a manifesto that is all over the place and confusing. So we wanted to talk about that and just reacting to that, because there's a lot of discussion that started coming up after that, and we want to get into it, especially with the ex-Muslim community, as you know, since we're critics of religion, we're critics of Islam. So how does that fit in? How do we deal with this? How do we talk about it? Obviously, we're as horrified as anybody else. I don't know anybody who isn't. Absolutely.
I know, actually. We saw a whole bunch of people. Again, this is something that a lot of people might not want to talk about, but if you want to point fingers at other communities, I always say, if you notice something in your own community, you have to mention it, and you have to call it out. You have to call it out. And I noticed in Atheist Republic, I didn't notice actually, our admins noticed, and they told us there were a lot of people within the Atheist Republic group, the private group, that were celebrating this. Okay, so I also want to make sure that we don't sugarcoat or try to hide or misrepresent the fact. Like a lot of people say, "Oh, I thought atheists were supposed to be enlightened or smarter or stuff like that." Like, no, we have our fair share of, people that
assholes.
I mean, we do. I mean, this is beyond asshole. People that were, supporting this act of violence, and the fact that it wasn't just one or two people. Our admins were really busy trying to clean that mess up. I mean, again, this is in the private group, which is a lot more restrictions on what you can post and compared to our public page, right? We do have our public page where almost everything is allowed. But I mean, the fact that they had a whole day trying to remove all these posts shows that we had a lot of people within our community that sympathize with the shooter. And, we have to, again, every time pointing these out is important because I don't want our communities to become tribal. We have to see, I don't want us to get this sense of, get the sense that our communities are immune from radicalism or people with radical violent views. Mm-hmm. So people have to see these things just so that you don't get that sense of false security. You have to clean up your own community before you point out to other communities. And by clean up, I don't mean go on.
No, I was going to say, did you see the video?
Oh yeah, and I know a lot of people say they didn't watch it, but I get it if you don't want to watch it. But I don't agree with people that say nobody should watch it. I watch a lot of ISIS videos as well, and I mean I don't recommend it to people that can't handle it. But it's to me it's important to see how much evil people are capable of, just so that you get a sense of what you're dealing with.
And I think it's important too. I watched the video as well. I also read the full manifesto. And I know that he tried to cover a lot of his stuff up with shit posting and everything. But you could tell the parts where he was being sarcastic and where he was being sincere. But I actually think it's really important to read the manifesto. I think one of the worst things that we do is when people say, this is just evil, this is senseless.
Yeah,
I can't explain. This is just inexplicable. Yeah, when you do that, you dismiss it and you push it off to the side. So the next time when something like this comes up, you don't recognize the symptoms. Right? If you don't understand what drives these people, if you don't understand the way that they communicate even, right? If you don't understand that, then the next time it happens, you're going to be caught blindsided again. Right? Yeah. And that's a huge problem. So I actually think it's very important. I don't think it's necessary for everybody to watch the video, but I think people should read the manifesto. And this idea that, okay, if you read the manifesto, that's what the killer wanted. That's what he wanted. And the people who want to read it and who want to be inspired by it are going to read it anyway. It's important that the people that we provide a counter narrative, and we can't do that unless we're reading the same shit that they read, that they're reading.
Yeah, a lot of people want to simplify evil acts. Evil is never simple. Just because you think that there's nuance to how evil, manifests itself, doesn't mean that you're excusing it. Explaining evil does not mean that you're excusing evil. And a lot of people simplify it and just, they're just like, oh, all violence is bad, which it is. I condemn it. Why not just they just try to put it in one box of evil, just call it evil, and it's very simple. But the way that acts of evil happen, there's a lot more. If you start digging into it, you see that there's different people get to it in many different ways. And if you don't try to understand how people get to it, you're not going to be very well equipped in trying to address the problem or even reducing the problem. Again, it's really go on.
No, I was saying that at this point there's this weird sense of loneliness being in the position that I guess we've been in, including me and Armin, where we've always called whenever an Islamic terrorist attack happened, we've always gone out and said, yes, this is we should not ignore the Islamic ideology or the doctrinal aspects of Islam that drive this, right? And then on the other hand, when this stuff happens, there's this right-wing sort of ethno-nationalist, anti-immigrant sentiment that drove this attack. We don't ignore that either. We call that out, that there's this ideology that drove this guy. But the way that things are politicized is that on the left, they love to immediately say, yeah, right-wing ideology is responsible for this, but they completely make excuses for when Islamic terrorism happens because of Islamic doctrine. On the other hand, on the right, they love to point out when Islamic doctrine causes or drives Islamic terrorism, but they will completely go into denial. And they are. Like, a lot of people on the right are just completely in denial about it. They're like, no, this wasn't really about ethno-nationalism. This is not about anti-immigration sentiment. It's all over. The parts in his manifesto that are clear, right, are exactly about that. It's about his disillusionment with white genocide. It's about his wanting to have like a white, and he's talking about Australia, like people coming in to colonize Australia, even though Australia, it was the Europeans who came to Australia to colonize. I mean, he doesn't have any sense of a colonial history, but I mean, it's not like I have high expectations, but so I feel like we have been, with Armin and I have been listening to us, I feel like we've been consistent calling out both sides on this, actually pretty fairly, and talking about the connection of beliefs and behavior on both sides.
Right. I mean, yeah. What do you say to people that say that this story is getting undeserved attention? Again, I'm just saying, giving you devil's advocate here. Given the number of people, like they say, so many more people are killed in different ways, and they don't get much attention. But when it happens in Western countries, in both sides, right? So, for example, when Muslims kill non-Muslims,
Sudan.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
In non-Western countries, it doesn't get much more. It doesn't get as much attention as when terrorist attack happen in Western. And by Western, I also mean like Western culture, right? Like even New Zealand and Australia. I don't know why they call it Western. It's in the East. Anyways, but like on the other side, when non-Muslims kill Muslims in outside of these countries, it doesn't get much attention. But when it happens in New Zealand, Australia, United States, United Kingdom, the whole world pay attention. It does seem like people value the lives of Muslims and non-Muslims in, Western countries more than non-Western countries, right? And
I don't. Yeah, I don't think it's about that. So this is what I think. And we have a patron question. Vince Atomori is asking, why is the MSM silent on Fulani jihadists who've racked up a death toll of over 120 Christians over the past 3 weeks? So,
by the way, we weren't silent about it. We reported this on Atheist Republic.
On Atheist Republic. And by the way, that report also has... there are errors in some of the reporting that has come out on that. A lot of the mainstream places have had trouble. They're not talking about... Anyway, it's a problematic story. But yeah, overall, there are many Christians who have been killed. So here's the issue. That is whataboutism. It's very similar to saying that, once... And I'll get to the numbers as well. But it's very similar to whenever...
it's whataboutism, but go on.
I think... so I'll tell you why I think it's whataboutism. Whenever you have Islamic terror attacks, you also have the Islamic apologists and the leftists saying, look, the Christians do this. Look at all the Muslims being killed in Myanmar. Look at all the Muslims being killed in China. Look at all the Muslims being killed in Yemen and all that. So they'll point to that as well, right? Gaza, for instance. So in that way, I think it's whataboutism. So here's what I don't think it's about whether it's non-Muslim or Muslim or whether it's white or brown people being killed. It's about the location.
Exactly. That's why the example I gave was not like, Muslims are being killed. What about non-Muslim? No, the examples on both sides, right? So again,
no, but
on both sides is location based. It has nothing to do with whether the victims are Muslim or non-Muslim. It's based on what the location of the attack is. That's the bias. The bias is not who the victim is. The bias is where did this happen.
Okay, so I'll tell you why it's not a matter of that those lives are worth less than these lives. It's a matter more of the fact that in Western countries, right? Let me give you an analogy. A guy breaks into the Pentagon and shoots 2 people dead, right? Another guy goes into Somalia in some rural area, war-ridden area, and he shoots 20 people dead, right, for the same cause. The one in the Pentagon is going to be, those lives are all worth the same, yes, but the one in the Pentagon will be more newsworthy. Why? Because the Pentagon has an established security system, right, that has been breached, which is much more serious. So in Western countries, okay, whether they're culturally, legally, social, politically, right, there is a system in place. There's a sophisticated system in place,
right,
that has been constructed. That's been constructed to protect human lives. When that is breached, it's a lot more newsworthy than when this kind of thing happens in a war zone. Now, it's not that it's more important or it's less important, but it is more newsworthy.
Yeah, but it's not fair to the victims. Again, two points. First,
it's not fair to the victims, but it is more newsworthy. Like it is. I would be more concerned, right, if things like this are happening in Somalia. I think that sucks. It's horrendous. It's tragic, and I wish that if there's something we can do to help fix that, I'm all for it. But if something like that happens in Toronto, I would be a lot more worried, even if the death toll was a lot less.
Well, no, that's not a fair example because you're in Toronto. Obviously, you're going to be more. But why would you?
I live in the Western world too, right? So I'd be much more worried about it.
Yeah, but I don't know. I'm more worried about Yemen than I'm about New Zealand. Again, it's not whataboutism because you're not saying okay. If this is whataboutism, whataboutism is. If you said, let's say, for example, thousands of Muslims are being killed in Yemen, right? If you said that we shouldn't pay attention to New Zealand because people are not paying attention to Muslims being killed in Yemen, that is whataboutism. But if you say, okay, we should pay attention to New Zealand terror attack, but we should also pay attention to the Yemeni Muslims being killed, that is not whataboutism. Because whataboutism is excusing one mistake because of another mistake.
But you're also diluting something that has happened at the moment. You're diluting it.
No, you're not diluting it. You are saying that okay, these people died. It's a tragedy, and there's nothing you can do to bring these people back to life. But if you are sad about the fact that these people died, there are people that are going to die tomorrow that maybe your voice could make a difference. So the fact that you feel sad about these 50, how many, 50 now, 55? How many is the latest number? I don't know.
Yeah, I think last I heard was 52, but I could
52? If you think that these 52 people did not deserve to die and you're upset about it, there's more than you can do than just being upset about it. Because there are other people that are being killed that you could do something about. That's why you talk about Muslims dying in Yemen. Because this is the moment that you're feeling sympathy. So use that sympathy and do something about it, right? You're saying
it's a good way to set an example. Say that, look, this is the example. This happens. You've seen this happen here, and you've seen how terrible and tragic and horrible this was. Now, just remember that this is happening to countless more people in Yemen, and that's why the title of this thing is. So
whataboutism would be excusing one mistake before another. So this wouldn't be whataboutism. You're saying this is a tragedy. We should talk about it. And by the way, there is another tragedy that is happening right now.
But most whataboutism doesn't say ignore this and pay attention to that. Most of it deflects from one thing to go. It's like Black Lives Matter versus All Lives Matter, right? So it deflects from, okay, this thing has happened. I know you guys are seeing all this stuff in Christchurch, but remember what's happening in Yemen as well. It's like with the Iraq War, right? Like when 9/11 happened, when everyone's like, people said this. People said, listen, 9/11 is a terrible tragedy. I know that you're seeing what happened over here, But hey, don't forget the hundreds of thousands of people that were killed by U.S. sanctions in Iraq.
No, that is okay. But this is okay. That's tribalism, right? That's trying to take some attention away from something that is against your narrative.
So is this.
No, these are also Muslims. Okay, so you're not being tribal. You're talking about people's lives, right?
No, but when people talk about the Christians that are killed, yes, those things are different. It's like when people talk about Islam, it's like, well, don't forget about Christianity. When we talk about Christianity, don't forget about Islam. Like
that is tribal stuff. That's just trying to. That's trying to take. That's trying to play with your narrative. You're saying like, what team am I on? Let's try to reduce that story and bring it back to the narrative that I work in, right? But you can't say that about Yemen because they are also Muslim.
Yeah. So there's many years ago there was an attack in Pakistan. This is around the time that they had the Peshawar attack and the Pakistani Taliban were doing a lot of attacks within the country. One was when they attacked the cricket team. I think it was the Sri Lankan cricket team that came to Pakistan, so they actually attacked the van, right? And that team had personal security promised by the president of the country. The Taliban ended up attacking it. Another was when they went and they attacked the headquarters of the police. Okay, they went in there and they killed a whole bunch of policemen. A third thing was when they went in and there was a school for kids of people in the army. And they went and they attacked an army school and they killed like 130, 140 children, right, in that school. That was in Peshawar. So now the Taliban has killed way more people in villages everywhere, even within the same country. But the reason those three incidents were really important is because the team had presidential security, the other one was a police headquarters, and the third site was it was an army school protected by the army. So that, to me, it's not that the kids who died in the army school, that their lives are worth more than the kids in the villages who were killed by the Taliban routinely in much higher numbers. Right. But the thing is, it was a breach of a system, right? And it is a barometer that if ISIS is doing an attack in Paris and they're able to kill 150 people in Paris, okay, that is a much more newsworthy item, even though it's not as horrific. It is a much more newsworthy item than when the attack happens, when they kill all the people in Iraq.
I get it, Ali. I get the explanation, but the explanation is not an excuse, right? Because
of course it's not an excuse.
I know, but let me finish my thought, okay? Because I'm not saying you're excusing it. You're explaining it, and your explanation makes sense, right? But a lot of people use this explanation as an excuse. You don't use it as an excuse, but a lot of people use this as an explanation because this is how it is. They think, okay, so let it be this way. But I'm saying I understand the explanation for why people care about people dying in these countries more than some other countries. I understand the explanation, but you could be part of the solution for it not being that way. You know what I mean?
Of course.
So if you so I understand, for example, when people die in Africa or when in Nigeria, for example, nobody gives a shit, right? If the same number of people die in the United States or Australia or UK or New Zealand, it's global news. And I understand the explanation, but again, the explanation is not an excuse.
No, it's not an excuse.
When people give that explanation, most people think like, okay, so this is the explanation, so we can't do about it. I say, I understand the explanation, I know why, I see why it is the way it is, but you and me and anyone else here can be part of making it a little bit less like that. A little bit less like that. And by that, I mean not that you shouldn't pay attention. I'm not advocating that when 20 people die in the United States, UK, New Zealand, Australia, to not talk about it. You should talk about it. You should talk about it as much as you possibly can. But what I'm advocating for is that next time 20 people die in Nigeria, or in Pakistan, or in India, or in Bangladesh, talk about that as well. Post about it as well. Call out whoever is responsible for that as well. Not to reduce the other one, but also cover up.
Yeah.
Okay.
I agree with that. I think that one of the things when we see things that are close to home, as in from a culture or society that's similar.
It doesn't make any sense close to home. Okay,
I know. Let me finish.
Okay.
Let me finish. When we see something close to home, as in a culture or society like New Zealand that is close to what we relate to, and we are moved by it and we're horrified by it, then yes, that is a good teaching moment to tell people that, okay, you know what you're seeing right now? You know how you feel right now? This is how millions of people feel on a daily basis when things like that happen in exponentially higher numbers in countries in Africa, in Sudan, in Somalia, in Pakistan, in Bangladesh, and in all of these other countries. So I think that, yes, it is a good way to make people aware of the world outside, right, where they live, their bubble, and to talk about that and bring awareness to that. But at the same time, I think that the story isn't that this many people died. The story that there has been a breach of our system. Our system is not working. We're supposed to be the people who have this under control. And if we don't have it under control, how are we going to control what's happening over there?
Yeah, but we would never want to. Okay, but here's the thing: like, we are trying to not lose the security that we have. But at the meantime, we don't give a shit about the people that don't have that level of security at all. I mean, I know I'm not
give a shit.
Yeah, you give a shit, but most people don't, right? How could we? You say like, oh, if we don't have the security there, what's hope for the people over there? Well, I mean, if we don't care about those people over there, like, it doesn't matter how much security we have, because we're never going to care about them, right? And again, this has nothing to do with proximity, because New Zealand is all over. Like, it's about people. This is a bit tribal, right? I mean, even Muslim lives matter more if they're in the right countries, apparently, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, so it doesn't. Yeah, go on.
Oh, no. Finish what you're saying.
And again, this is not a Muslim or non-Muslim thing, because if the other side as well, like the Orlando, for example, shooting when the Muslim guy went and killed a whole bunch of gay people, that gets a lot more attention than when Al-Shabaab goes and kills a whole bunch of people in Africa, right? Mm. It's not about whether the victims are Muslims or non-Muslim. It's about the location. The location makes people care about something. And again, this is not the Western world. This is a thing that people are guilty of on a global scale. Like, for example, it's not about the Western world not caring about the non-Western world. Even in like Egypt or in many Arab countries, they were talking about Cordoba and Spain, more than Yemen. Their fellow Arabs, their fellow Muslims. Even they are obsessed with stories in Western countries more than stuff in Arab countries or in other so this is something everybody's guilty of. I just don't know.
We're gonna get to go ahead.
No, by the way, I do want to mention that the people that are trying to use these as to score points, like, okay, so there are the people that see these tragedies and they just try to say, okay, what the fuck, how could we how did this happen? How could we reduce these things, right? And then there are other people on both sides, okay? Both on the anti-Islam side and also the left side, the left, right, every side, right? Every time an attack happens, whether it's Muslim Islamic terror attack or whether it's an attack on Muslims, they look at this and like, how could I make this serve my narrative, right? And these people are like scum, right? Like
so that actually takes us into the question that I was going to read out from a patron called Quranic Islam. So he's saying, or she's saying, blaming Islamic terrorism on Islam is akin to blaming the Christchurch shooting on right wing and conservatives. Wrong. It's the extremists, fanatics, always. So I completely disagree with that.
I disagree with that as well.
Yeah, this is, and I have to, so I want to bring up something that I read. It was an article from, I think, from Douglas Murray, right, who wrote the Strange Death of Europe about the problem of immigration from Muslim countries into Europe and so on. And he was making a similar point. He's like, the only person who's responsible for this is the shooter, who's a fanatic, right? So yes, the only person who's responsible for the deaths is a shooter. But what do we say when there are Islamic terrorist attacks? And what does Douglas Murray himself say? He says that there is an ideology behind it that has a plausible justification and a connection to the behavior that it engenders, right? So there's jihadist doctrine, right? There is an otherism, there's a tribal nature and a violent nature to Islam, the Islamic religion, that drives Islamic terrorism, and there is no denying that link. If you are familiar with it, if you're familiar with the text, you know that the belief engenders certain behavior. So why would we deny that now? Why would we say that, no, we should not blame the right-wing narrative and all of that? Of course, the current, the anti-immigration sentiment, the ethno-nationalist, there's a white genocide happening, all of that crap. All of these sentiments, these are all things that drove this. This was an ideological terrorist attack.
Okay, but we don't, again...
if we're not denying the first one, why are we denying this one? Why are people trying to deny it?
Do ethno-nationalists have a book or a doctrine or consistent doctrine? I don't think they do. Islam does. There's nothing within...
It does, but the narrative, the ideology that drives it, right? The fact that, we need to... And it ranges, right? Even with Muslims, right? They have a range of beliefs in terms of how we should deal with the non-believers.
No, we're talking... Okay, we have to be very clear. Are we talking about Muslims or are we talking about Islam, right? If we're talking about Muslims and ethno-nationalists, there's nothing consistent within them. Muslims are very different from each other. Ethno-nationalists are very different from each other, okay? Mm-hmm. Islam is one thing, okay? Islam is this Quran, right? So there's some book that I could refer to, and there's a lot of call for violence right here in this book. There is, okay? And the hadith even more. So there's diversity in Muslims. There's not much diversity in Islam. There's diversity in ethno-nationalists, but do ethno-nationalists have
do they have a central infallible text?
No,
they don't.
All right, so there's nothing you really can point to.
But do they? But no. I think we're parsing a lot we're missing the forest for the trees. Do ethno-nationalists, right? Do they have a dogmatic ideology that is rooted in a sense of identity and belief rather than dogmatic belief, rather than reason? Yes, absolutely they do.
Yeah, but is there anything... I'm not defending...
You don't have to have a central, Catholic church. You don't have to have anything like that.
That wasn't my point. Obviously, I don't agree with ethno-nationalists, right? Uh-huh. But there is nothing within the essence of ethno-nationalism that calls out for violence, even if it's wrong. I could call it out. Ethno-nationalism is nothing other than a demand for have different ethnicities having their own countries, which is, I think, it's nonsense. But there is no
ethno-nationalism isn't just that, though. Ethno-nationalism, there is a level of nationalism.
Let me finish my point, though. So maybe I'm wrong, and you can correct me. I'm right, right? But there's nothing necessarily within that it actually calls for violence, right? But Islam, there is something within the essence of Islam that calls for violence.
That directly calls for violence? Yes. Okay, that's right. Okay, but ethno-nationalism isn't just something that isn't just you've got the modern sort of revisionist, or I guess ethno-nationalist reform, the reform version of it, that just talks about, hey, we just want white people to have their own thing. We want black people to have their own. The Richard Spencer view, right? That's one view. Okay, and that's a more sort of modern, more recent view. But the original ethno-nationalists, the ones who are, Robert Spencer himself has been doing the Heil Hitler sign and everything. That was based around ethnic cleansing. It was based around forcibly removing.
That's okay. We have to be clear about the difference between white supremacy and ethno-nationalism.
So we've talked about this before, and I think that the line is very, very blurred. I think that if you believe in segregation, if you feel like all the other races should be separate or all the other ethnicities should be separate from you, you inherently think that your race is superior.
No. I mean, okay, so I think there's a huge... They share a lot of people with each other, but their definition is completely different. And again, both of them are completely wrong. I think all white supremacists are ethno-nationalists, but not all ethno-nationalists are white supremacists.
I don't. I think that's what they say.
No, okay. I mean by definition. By definition.
To me, it's like intelligent design and creationism. People who are intelligent design, like this isn't creationism, this is intelligent design. It's a theory. It doesn't have anything to do with God creating everything. It's just a matter of a higher intelligence.
Yeah, but what you're describing is two names for the same thing. These are completely different definitions.
I personally, like from everything that I've seen and all of the arguments that I've seen, I know that theoretically, if you talk to white nationalists, right, they will sit there and they will say that, I don't have... I mean, you know how we say that Islam, we're against Islam, we're not against Muslims, right? And we actually mean it, right? Because we've got Muslim family friends. Geert Wilders says the same thing. He says, oh, no, I'm not against Muslims, I'm against Islam. But there are people who use that. And one more example about this, like anti-Semitism. A lot of people who say that, okay, criticizing Israel is not anti-Semitism, which is true. Criticizing Israel is not anti-Semitism. But there are a lot of anti-Semitic people who will come and say, I'm just criticizing Israel.
I know, there are a lot of people that say, I'm anti-Islam, not anti-Muslim, but they're actually also anti-Muslim. There are also a lot of people that say, I'm against Israel, not against the Jews, but they're also against the Jews. But there are also a lot of people that are actually against Islam but not against Muslim, okay? So, I mean, again, both ethno-nationalists and white supremacists, they're both dead wrong. And I know there are some people that say they're ethno-nationalists and not white supremacists, but they're lying. They are actually white supremacists. But there are also examples of people that are actually ethno-nationalists and not white supremacists.
Not white
supremacists. There are.
I just haven't found any.
Personally, I'm
sure.
I met a lot of them.
There has to be somebody.
And I'm not defending them because they're both wrong. Okay. Again, for people that haven't heard our last episode, I just like really quickly tell you the difference. An ethno-nationalist that is not a white supremacist would say that I don't think any race is superior than the other. I just think every race should have their own country, and it's better if we're separate. We will be able to mutually work with each other if we don't live next to each other. There's a lot of conflict if you mix races with each other. They say black people should have their own country, white people should have their own country, Japanese should have their own country, Jews should have Israel. I support Israel. I'm not against the Jews. I think it's good that they have their own country. They say we could get along better if we live in every race lives in their own country. And this is absolutely wrong. More data shows that if we mix with each other, actually we get along a lot better, especially if we're not segregated in like London, for example, like US and Canada, where we mix with each other a lot more. It's working out a lot better than somewhere like London, right? So mixing is a good thing. So I know that they are wrong, but the argument, even though it's wrong,
you're saying that they're different from the supremacists.
The supremacists, okay? And I know.
Yeah, I agree that when you define them, the definitions of the two terms are completely different. I'm only saying that I don't know
how you can say that with so confidence, because have you met all ethno-nationalists?
Data?
I have. All of them?
That's what I'm saying. I've met quite a few of them.
I met quite a few of them.
I may not have met as many in person, but I've corresponded with a lot of them. And the ones that all of them, they say the exact same thing. They're like, no, white nationalism is different. We're afraid about white people. They're only going to be 10% of the population in 2050 or whatever. They give up all these stats. We're not against all of the other races. We just want our own thing. We want to preserve it. But I am not convinced that any of those people hold that belief.
I don't know how you can say that. I don't know. Can you read minds? I don't understand how you're so confident about this. I agree with you that a lot of them are bullshitting, that they're actually white supremacists. But I'm not saying you can say that about all of them.
Intelligent design people who swear they're not creationists, and I can't read their minds either. It's just that I have my own way of.
But you can't say that you're overgeneralizing a whole bunch of people based on the experience that you have with some of them. Again, okay, I disagree with you on this.
I feel like people can use theoretical dialogue to manipulate people, and I just don't like falling for it. There is somebody who pointed out that I said Robert Spencer instead of Richard Spencer, so my apologies to Robert Spencer. He's going to really like that. Anyway, Robert Spencer is very different from Richard Spencer. Robert is shorter and has a beard. Anyway, let's go on and... So by the way,
I really think what you're doing is a bit dangerous, because this is how you lose people, all right? Because if we do actually have ethno-nationalists that are not white supremacists, I think we can win them back, right? If you just dismiss, let's say if you're wrong, okay? Let's say that you're right about some ethno-nationalists that are actually white supremacists, that they're just bullshitting us. But what if half of them are actually the kind of people that I'm saying, and we're just telling them like, no, you're all just a bunch of fucking racist loons?
Oh no, we're not telling them that. I don't think that you have lost people because they're white supremacists. We've had,
but they're but they're more far gone. If than somebody that is an ethno-nationalist, but another white.
I don't think they are.
I think you understand, if you accept what people are telling you about what they believe in, instead of telling them, no, I know what you believe in more than what you're telling me. I think if you actually listen to them and be like, okay, now I see what you're saying, but this is why you're still wrong, even if you're not a white supremacist, I think there's a better chance that you could win them over than if you just tell them like, no, you're telling me you believe in this, but I'm telling you that you're lying to me.
No, I would never tell them. I mean, you know how I talk to people. I'm like, I get called regressive because of it. But the way that I'm not as firebrand. I'm talking to you about this discussion. We're not talking about a specific person. But I think that if I talk to an ethno-national, and I've done this, I've corresponded with them, and I've asked them questions, and I've had them come to the conclusion. I'm like, okay, so you think this, you think this. So how is this different from thinking that, your race, because it has to be preserved, why do you think it's better? Eventually it comes down to that. If you point out to them, hey, what you're thinking is there isn't really much difference between what you're saying, what the white supremacist is saying, then I think that's also a way to bring them back, to alert them to, what they're talking about, even though it sounds very, very rational, but in theory, right? That it's really not that much different.
When you tell people that you're telling me this, but I don't believe you, I really think this about what you're saying, it sounds to me like the Muslims that come to me and say like, oh, Armin, you say that you left Islam because of this, but I know it's because you wanted to sin. And I'm like, no, that's not true. And they're like, no, I have figured you out more than you're saying this.
No, I welcome that opportunity. I like it when people say that to me, and I like talk. Listen, for the longest time, we have been, and this is another problem I had with the Douglas Murray article. For the longest time, we've been talking about not just, he's saying that we shouldn't blame all of the conservative dialogue and the right wing, the people for, this one attack because this is violent. But for the longest time, we've been talking about how moderate Muslims and not just Muslims, but moderate religious people often cover up for the fundamentalist versions of the faith, right?
Right.
Whether it's Christianity, the Sam Harris has a whole thing on this in his book, his earlier books about how moderates end up covering for fundamentalist theology, and they do that because the rhetoric matters, right? When you're talking about the same kind of principles, then it matters. Like, another example in the Quran, in Surah 5, 72 and 73, the verses 72 and 73, it talks about how all Christians are blasphemers. Anybody who believes Jesus is the Son of God, anybody who believes in the Trinity is a blasphemer, is a disbeliever. It doesn't say to kill them, right? But that rhetoric is used as an excuse to persecute Christians. Because if God doesn't like them, then they must be stumped. Right? My point is, I think all of this dialogue, whether it's the rhetoric of the white nationalists, whether it's the rhetoric of the general overall people who are just talking about white genocide and all of that stuff in theory, but they don't necessarily believe in violence. Just like the moderates cover up for fundamentalist religious doctrines, this kind of dialogue, the mainstream dialogue, does cover up for right wing, the really insane far right shit.
That's very different.
I don't think so.
Can I tell you what? Okay, because there's no central doctrine that they're covering for, right? If you are a right-wing person that does not support violence...
Not central. The most extreme version of the doctrine. The most fundamentalist interpretation of the doctrine.
If you're a right-wing person, again, both me and you are left, right? But I really think that a lot of people are throwing... A lot of the right-wing people, they're just throwing them into the same category as these far-right extremists, right? And if you are a right-wing person that says I don't support violence, I don't know what are we accusing them of making a cover for? You're not.
That's like saying a lot of people are throwing the moderate Muslims in with the whole jihadist Muslims.
No.
But
the reason why with moderate Muslims is different, right, is because moderate Muslims say that they support the Quran without actually following the Quran. And the Quran does have violence in it. Okay?
Right,
for somebody that says, I'm right-wing, and I don't support violence, and I don't support these alt-right loonies, what are they making? What kind of a text or doctrine that calls out for violence are they creating a cover for? What document are they supporting without following that calls out for violence?
Yeah.
They're not.
If you look at so here's the thing. If you want to get into the specifics of a textual doctrine, that you have to have a textual doctrine that is codified on paper, right? Then you're right. Okay. But what we're talking about, when we talk about the most fundamentalist form of Islam, we're talking about like the pure adherence to the most literal version of the ideology. Then we're talking about like the jihadists and so on who commit the violence. The equivalent for that on the right wing would be someone who believes in ethnic cleansing, the whole Hitler Nazi thing. The people who really went for Mein Kampf.
You have to be that extreme.
Who are inspired by it.
Right.
Okay. There are many, and by the way, if you talk to ethno-nationalists, they'll tell you there are things in Mein Kampf that they think were right. They don't agree with Hitler's prescription of it. Just like Muslims say, well, in the Quran it says that you have to commit violence, but that's misinterpreted.
Yeah, but there's also a lot of ethno-nationalists that don't believe in any of that.
Yes, and there's a lot of Muslims who don't believe in it, but they cover for it. When you talk about it,
again, not
right,
the same.
When they give unwitting, unintentional cover for it. The mainstream right-wing narrative out there that's right now does give cover.
Like what?
Right? At least I think. All of the, like when you talk about ethno-nationalism itself, right?
Come on.
When you talk about white nationalism, as you're saying, and they say that it's very different from white supremacy. I think white nationalism is a stepping stone. It covers for white supremacy. They share a lot of the same beliefs. When they share just like moderate Muslims share a lot of the same beliefs that they do. And a lot of moderate Muslims, by the way, they look at the Quran and they say that. Yeah, no, I'm going to come.
This episode is going to make me look like I'm actually supporting ethno-nationalists. Again, I'm not. I completely disagree with ethno-nationalists. I just think there's more nuance. If you want to deal with this nonsense, you have to understand the differences between them, okay? You can't treat them all
I
like
think you have to understand the differences that they say. Like, I think that the intelligent design people are covering for.
Okay, so we're not going to agree on this. I'm just going to say that I think it's completely different. I don't think if an ethno-nationalist says that they don't believe in violence, they don't believe in ethnic cleansing or any of that, I'm still going to call them out for being an ethno-nationalist. I'm still going to tell them that they're wrong, but I'm not going to accuse them as providing cover for violence because they're not. I think they're not. And I know you disagree with me on that. And I think
I would say that they're unwittingly providing cover for violence, just the way that moderate Muslims
moderate
cover for the dogma.
I don't think it's the same because moderate Muslims are again not on purpose. I'm not going to...
The doctrine and the text.
Yeah, I'm not going to accuse moderate Muslims for supporting violence. Obviously, moderate Muslims, most of them are very good people. But they are being used as a way to give legitimacy to a bunch of documents that does actually call for violence. Again, there are good people that are being used in a way that they don't know. So because I'm saying that they are being used like that, I don't hold them responsible for that. Like I don't want anybody to. They don't deserve any hate for it. They are pawns in a machine that they don't know that they're being used in that way. Okay, They deserve sympathy, not hate.
Yeah. So the difference between our positions is that I think that I do think that they're both sides are being used. The moderates on both sides are being used that way. But I agree with you that on neither side should those people be targeted as this is your fault. Right? Completely. I think it's a fault of the rhetoric and whatever the doctrine. But anyway, we'll disagree on that. I'm going to move on now. The next topic is something that I think we're both going to agree with. American Atheists. The organization that we both really like.
Or used to like, at least. I don't know.
I know. So what they did was they posted an article from the Huffington Post saying that that it's time to talk about Islamophobia and the contribution of people like Bill Maher and Sam Harris and other new atheists, just generally new atheists, including Richard Dawkins, that their contribution to something like what happened in New Zealand. Right. So there's a blame going on for critics of Islam, right? Legitimate critics of Islam or new atheists who are actually critics of everything. I mean, people forget that one of Sam Harris's books is called Letter to a Christian Nation, and he has absolutely skewered Christianity in that as well. So there is the same thing with Richard Dawkins, the God Delusion. Most of it really is about Christianity and Judaism because that's what he knows. So in any case. They've said that it also in the movie Religulous, Bill Maher, it was mainly focused on Christianity and Judaism. There's very little Islam in it. So they're saying that basically their criticism of Islam is somehow linked to what happened in New Zealand, and obviously a lot of ex-Muslims are getting this too. So Armin, I'll let you comment first. I have something to say on this as well.
I'm trying to bring on Sarah Hayder's tweet on this because she had a good response to it, but it's not loading. But it's obviously.
Oh yeah, she said she basically said so. American atheists, if you're saying this, then aren't you? And then that was an excellent response. She said that then are you going to blame? What about all of the Christianophobia that you guys have caused by criticizing Christianity? Like all of the Christians who've been killed in all of these Muslim countries, did you cause that?
Yeah, it's such a pathetic knee-jerk reaction. How is that different from saying to Muslims that they're responsible for all the terror attacks in the world? Isn't that the same thing? Like, because Muslims, me and you are very much against Islam, but we would never go as far as saying that, hey, all Muslims in the world, because you support this book that is responsible for all these terror attacks, then you're all to be blamed. We wouldn't say anything like that to the imams or even to the people that teach Islam. We wouldn't blame them for all these Islamic attacks. We will call out Islam and we will criticize them. We think why it's wrong, but we would never, cast such a wide net of blaming people just because they. So here's the thing. For example, a lot of Muslims. They criticize atheists, right? And why atheism is wrong. And that's great. I want more Muslims to criticize atheists because that encourages dialogue between atheists and Muslims, right? A lot of Muslims criticize Christianity and they point out why Christianity is nonsense, according to their Islamic view. And that's also great. I want Christians and Muslims to have debates and dialogue with each other. Imagine if all of a sudden there was an attack on... you don't have to imagine; it happens all the time.
You don't have to imagine; it happens. They're killed every day.
Yeah, imagine if when an attack when Muslims attack Christians, for example, in Nigeria, right? If we go and say all those criticizing of when Muslims criticize Christianity as as a religion that is nonsense, that doesn't make sense. Like when Muslims laugh at Christians, so how could God have a child? How nonsensical is that? Imagine if we go to Muslim, like all these, every time you criticize Christianity, you're responsible.
Just disagree with it.
Yeah.
Even if they just disagree with Christianity.
Yeah. And we tell Muslims that you shouldn't have criticized Christianity because now you're responsible for all this hate against Christians, and now Muslims are killing Christians because of your narrative. How dumb would that be if we said something like that? How dumb would that be? Or, yeah, I mean, I don't know. I mean...
Yeah, it would be really stupid. I
mean, Muslims have books on why atheists are wrong. Muslims have books on why there is a God and why people that think there is no God are so completely wrong. Should we go to the author of that book that is telling us why atheists are wrong and tell them that they're responsible for the killing of atheists in Islamic countries because they're building they're creating a narrative that makes people hate atheists? That would be so stupid. I mean, I don't know.
Yeah, idiotic.
Yeah.
I've also, one of the things that I've been saying, this argument, is I've been bringing up how Noam Chomsky, right, is a very big critic of U.S. foreign policy. That's been his entire career, right? And a lot of those criticisms have been very, very legitimate, especially in his earlier days. He was pretty much right on the money. So Noam Chomsky criticizes U.S. foreign policy. Osama bin Laden quoted Noam Chomsky. He cited him in his speeches. He owned Noam Chomsky's books. Okay, he said some of the same things that Noam Chomsky said. Like Noam Chomsky said that the U.S. is the greatest terrorist in the world. Osama bin Laden said the same thing. Okay, now when Al Qaeda goes out and kills, loads of Americans, right? Because they say they have a problem with U.S. foreign policy. Does that mean that Noam Chomsky does that mean his criticisms of U.S. foreign policy were illegitimate? Does that mean that he should stop criticizing them? Does that mean that he is responsible for the terrorist attacks against Americans, killing by Al Qaeda? No, it would be completely ridiculous.
Right.
Right.
By the way,
and people should not be.
Yeah. Go ahead. Sorry, finish it.
No, that's it. That's what I'm trying to say.
Just to tell you how ridiculous this has become, people are blaming from all the people that they could blame for all the attack in New Zealand. They're Dan Arrow and Steve Shives. Is that his name? Yeah, Steve Shives. They're blaming Seth Andrews for encouraging the attacks in New Zealand, like from one of the nicest people that you can imagine. They're saying his narrative, but also what is it? Also, there was a tweet by this Nice Mango Twitter account that also blamed me for encouraging the New Zealand attacks.
Oh, that account's going to blame everybody. So
yeah, that account
included.
So
this is this is obviously something that we've seen. I think that we agree on this. We think this is ridiculous, and I don't think this should derail people from talking about these things. It's
interesting because they're doing exactly the same. But again, instead of they're so lost. I don't know. I don't think it's worth our time to address them, but we should be careful if we call those out, we should call the people that do the same thing in our community, right? So it's easy to point at the regressive leftists and be like, wow, these guys have lost it, right? But we have to acknowledge that people on our side do this as well. Every time, so these people on the far left, again, not everyone on the left does this, hashtag not all, but they are using Muslim victims as a way to score political points, right? Mm-hmm. But people on our side do the same thing. Whenever there's an Islamic terror attack, I think there are a lot of people on our side that are kind of looking forward to these attacks because it's just an opportunity to make their point. I mean, be very, just try to notice that if you're looking forward to people dying, then something is really fucked up. I mean, you don't need to use people dying to make this book is going to be an idiotic, violent, barbaric book, even if there's not a single terror attack, okay? You don't need people dying to make your point. You can make your point, you just need to read this book, okay? And it's nonsense. It's pretty obviously nonsense.
Yeah, go
on.
Mm-hmm. No, I was saying after this, the Christchurch attack, I think yesterday, yes, at the time of this recording yesterday, in Utrecht in Amsterdam, there was a man who got on a tram and shot 3 people and injured 5. And a lot of the same people that I guess you were talking about, Armin, who said that who was sort of in a way celebrating it, or were just really annoyed that this Christchurch attack was carried out by sort of a right-wing guy. Now, suddenly, these people were really, really hoping that guy was an Islamic terrorist. He turned out to be an Islamic terrorist, but they didn't want to hold their judgment. They were just waiting. Mm. They were really excited about it in a way, and that is. Yeah, I think that's completely ridiculous.
And the thing is actually, yeah, go on.
No, I'm just saying it's really sad. I think that we should call out, and I should point out that I just said this whole Noam Chomsky analogy. It didn't help when Noam Chomsky actually went and met all the Hezbollah people, and he held hands with them and he embraced them, and he did a whole photo opportunity with them. Okay. And unfortunately, within the atheist community, Armin is talking about calling out our own. There are people who've gotten into bed who are celebrating these Christchurch attacks, like you said, and there are other people who are blaming other atheists who are or ex-Muslims who have actually lived under Islamic theocracy and who have risked their lives to escape it. They're actually blaming people like that for the New Zealand attack. But when I saw that Chelsea Clinton was blamed for it, I thought, okay, now I don't feel so bad. Did you see that, Armin?
Yeah, I saw that, and that was really dumb. I mean, this is why the far left is going to destroy itself, because they're just so, it's just so stupid. I don't want to, but here's the thing. I do think a lot of people say, Armin, what are you talking about?
And I actually, sorry, before you go on, I want to say I am much more worried about the left destroying itself than the right destroying itself, because I consider the left to be
the left will not destroy itself. The far left will destroy itself. The left will survive.
The line's getting very blurry between far left and left, and
far right. Far left are a minority in the left. Again, let's be fair to the left. They're a minority. They're just so crazy that they're more newsworthy than the rest of the left. That's why they get more attention.
They're louder.
They're louder and they're more interesting because they're so nuts. But when a tragedy does happen, it's not like that you shouldn't. People are paying attention, and I do think it's fair to the fact that people are attention to try to, mobilize something out of it to avoid to stop more people from being killed, right? But so let's say a tragedy happens and people are paying attention. Now what you do with that attention, I think, matters. If you're going to use that attention to win arguments or score political points, then I think that's wrong. But if you're trying to use that attention to try to find a way to avoid more death, if that's your intention, maybe you're actually making the same arguments, either way. But just think about your intentions. Are you just saying this is a great opportunity for me to show those people on the other side that they're wrong? Or are you making the arguments to say, okay, people are paying attention, let's see if we could avoid more harm? All right? And if, you might do some self-reflection to see what are you actually trying to do here, okay?
Do you want to make a point or do you want to make a change?
Right. I mean, and sometimes you feel like you're trying to make a change, but you're actually trying, if you reflect a little bit more, you might actually just trying to win an argument, okay? Just be very honest with yourself when you're doing these things and see what you're trying to do here, okay?
Right.
And both sides, again, whether it's an attack on Muslims or it's an Islamic terror attack. By the way, one thing that is going to be, a lot of people are going to say that is factual, and I think, Ali, you might disagree with me on this, right?
Let's see.
And I think people will deny that this is a fact, and it's going, because it is actually a fact, the people with bad intentions will use this truth to gain more followers, is this fact. There are more people dying in the name of Islam than Muslims being killed. Okay? Like, Islam is still, on a global scale, a much, much greater threat than all this alt-right stuff. All of it combined. And a lot of people will think that if you say that, that's hateful. Or that's, you say that's stupid, that's, missing the point. But it is the truth. It is the truth. And people try, and the thing is that if you don't acknowledge this truth, then the people that are actually anti-Muslim bigots will capitalize on the fact that you're not going to mention this truth to gain people, to gain more sympathy and followers, because they're going to be the people that have monopoly over the truth. And a lot of people will try to say this is not true by focusing only on, like, United States. They say, like, oh, in the United States, there's more terror attacks by, alt-right groups. Oh, yeah, okay, you focused on the country now. Now your arguments, now your numbers are looking in your favor. Or they focus on growth rates rather than absolute numbers, right? They say, far-right terror attacks they don't say that they're biggest ones, they say they're the fastest growing, but fastest growing from a very small number. Like, if you're 0.01 going to 0.05%, that's like growing by 500%, but obviously it's very easy to grow by 500% if you're starting from a very small number. But if you look at the absolute numbers, percentage-wise, Islamic terror attacks are a lot more. If you look at it from a global scale, like, Islam is still the leading cause of terrorism by a huge margin. There's no denying that.
So I actually don't agree with you on that. I don't disagree with you on that. I think that factually you're right. I'm not going to say something that contradicts it, but I will say something that adds to it. My opinion is that, as you said, when you talk about one country, or in the Western world, right, generally in where we live, there was a time when Islamic terrorism did seem like it was the greatest threat. Not too long ago, 2014, 2015, an ISIS attack virtually every month. There were people being killed, sometimes in the hundreds, sometimes in the dozens. And it was, a really, really big thing. Since then, since around 2015, 2016, there has been a rise in this sort of the right-wing violence, right? And right-wing, or at least the talk of a lot of this right-wing rhetoric that is against certain people. So the danger over here is that it is in danger of gaining power. So in the Austrian elections from a couple of years ago, the party that was founded by the Nazis got up to 46% of the vote. It lost, but it didn't lose by much. Marine Le Pen became a very...
But that's a different point.
Had a realistic... it's a different point. That's what I'm saying. It's an additional point. It became an addition. So I think that is something, the rise of this far-right authoritarian ethno-nationalistic populism is something that I like to pay attention to a lot.
Didn't say okay, but that's
I know.
But I don't like it that when every time I say this, that's the response, because there's nothing that obviously there's no claim.
I'm not saying that this contradicts you.
I know you're not saying that, but it's taking the conversation to a different place, because there's no denying that we should pay attention to the rise of the far right. There's no denying that it's a problem. There's no denying that it's growing. There's no denying.
I'm saying I'm actually. This is where where I'll talk about where it's different, is that I think in that context of them having power in the Western world, I think it is a more serious threat, because Islam is not currently within striking distance of having power in the Western world or overturning the Western world or bringing it down.
You're too Western focused. I see.
Because yes, I am, because I think that people who have.
There are people being chopped, left and right because they wrote the wrong thing. Where are the Nazis, the neo-Nazis right now that are chopping people left and right? It's not even comparable.
Right. It is, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that when you have this threat, the threat of far-right nationalism, or this white nationalist, ethno-nationalist, doctrine, right, that is rising, the populism that is rising in Europe and the US and in Western countries, it is within striking distance of having power. In the US, there is an element of it, like in the form of Trumpism, that is already in power, and that is that is a national crisis, and in certain ways, it is actually a bigger threat, right, than Islamic fundamentalism around the world.
Actually, if you think about the global impact of the far left is a lot more than the right now in the United States. Because they might.
It's because they've recognized this is a national crisis.
No. Because the far left has a control over the Silicon Valley, and the Silicon Valley is the community standards of what the companies in Silicon Valley decide is
far left doesn't have control. I think that left liberals have control.
No, it's regressive leftists. No, come on. Twitter, YouTube, Facebook, the way that they are very biased, and they are very much influencing dialogue.
They helped get Trump elected. They're the vehicles for the far right to rise to power.
Can I say something? Not intentionally. Okay, what they're doing intentionally matters to me more than what they're doing unintentionally. And what they're doing intentionally is that they are policing speech, and they have their own political agenda, ideology, and they are very clearly their political ideology is very clearly influencing their community standards. And this is a very small city that is influencing dialogue on a global scale. And I think that level of influence is more than whatever Trump influence has on a global scale. Trump has made the right, people hate the right. So I think the reaction to Trump is actually the other way that you think. It's actually because of Trump, there's going to be a counter reaction to the right. But what I think
that's like saying if it wasn't for Islamic jihadists, people
no. What I'm saying is that Trump doesn't have influence on a global scale the way the Google, YouTube, and Google, Twitter, and Facebook have over every single conversation that people are having all around the world. So I think both the far left and Islam are a greater threat than anything on the far right on a global scale. And even if you focus on Western countries, if you adjust the violence on a per capita basis, then Islam will look a lot worse than the far right. Because obviously you could say so if I focus on the US, there's more far right crimes. Well, guess what? There's more far right people than Muslims in the US as well. If you adjust those numbers per capita, then Islamic terror attacks starts looking worse even in Western countries.
Mm-hmm. So here's the thing. I think this is more complicated than it is. Bobby B is echoing your point. He's saying, Ali, all social media follow a social justice cult ideology. They own the Democrats now. They own the schools. They're using what power they have to suppress opponents' political speech. They are tyrants. And I agree with that. I've been banned from Facebook. Lishpa gets banned on Facebook all the time. Yeah. A lot of ex-Muslims get banned on. We've talked about that here. And it's really, really, it's a problem and it's an issue, and we're not happy about it. So I understand that happens. But
Facebook has given to Pakistan. Atheist Republic had the number one country subscribed to Atheist Republic on Facebook was Pakistan. And now what? You know what happened? We have lost all our fans in Pakistan because nobody in Pakistan can actually see Atheist Republic anymore.
With Pakistan, their government has started cracking down on a lot of things. All the atheists, I actually just talked to somebody who's writing an article about this. The atheist community in Pakistan has gone completely underground and off the grid, and they're basically just communicating through WhatsApp right now. But it's the same thing. Netflix took down that
guys,
show.
The people are saying we need to talk about Yemen because it was in the title.
We will. We're getting to that. So the Netflix took down the show, the Saudi Arabia show that Hassan Minhaj did. There's a lot of issues. YouTube is taking down videos that are about Pakistan or about blasphemy and so on. So these are issues. But I don't want to, like, this idea that it is completely owned by the left is, I think, a little overblown because everything...
I said there's a bias.
I think the reason that the far right has grown, I think that a lot of right-wing stuff, the Trumpism, has a huge platform on Twitter. People talk about the mainstream media, how, the biggest mainstream media, the number one cable channel in the U.S. is still Fox News. And one of the biggest outlets is Breitbart Talk Radio. The Rush Limbaughs and the Sean Hannitys.
Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter do.
Yeah, they have a global audience, right? But I'm just saying that generally I think it's both. Yes, in Silicon Valley, there's a confluence. There's both. They're all capitalists. Obviously, they're very, very conservative when it comes to a lot of the economic side of things. But when it comes to social issues, yes, they are very liberal, and they tend to be more liberal.
They're regressive. They're not just liberal. I am liberal. They're regressive. They are regressive.
I think there are elements of them that are regressive. Yes, but I don't think that it's overall. I think that's a little overblown to say that the entire thing's like that. I definitely acknowledge their problems. They're going through a lot of issues trying to figure out how to police this stuff, how to figure out, what do we do if there's so many issues that they're bombarded with. I know people like to shit on Mark Zuckerberg all the time, but he has to handle the whole Russia thing. He has to handle the whole privacy thing. There's the whole monster that is completely new, and nobody really knows how to navigate it. I hope they figure it out.
Again, I know they're private companies and they can do whatever they want, but this is a huge problem. I don't think freedom, them banning us on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube and stuff, it's not against free speech, but given that how much more dialogue is happening on social media than offline, free speech is not enough anymore. We had free speech laws to protect us from government, but given the influence of these monopolies over our dialogue, we need to go beyond protecting speech from government. We need to start protecting speech from these monopolies. So free speech laws is not enough anymore. We need something. We either need to break up these monopolies or we need an internet bill of rights or something like that. Free speech
or conservatives can start their own social media platforms and then figure out a way to do that.
No, they can't because they have. No, look.
They already do. I mean,
they tried. Ali, I don't want to get into that discussion because they were tried and they completely destroyed them. These are monopolies. Okay, they are colluding with each other and they're not letting anybody compete with them. But let's go to Yemen because this was in the title.
So let's do that. There was one question here that was that I read about Quranic. Anyway, I'll find that. But yeah, so there is an issue. So earlier we talked about this. We said that we're talking about when Muslims are being targeted. So one of the things that we repeat ad nauseum here on this podcast is that, yes, we're critics of Islam, but we are not anti-Muslim. In fact, the reason we are critics of Islam is because Muslims are the biggest victims of Islam, right? So one thing that you saw this guy in Christchurch, yes, he went in and he shot at Muslims. If you watch the video, he didn't care if there were kids, he didn't care if there were men, women, whatever. All he cared about was that they're Muslim. It was completely indiscriminate. It was like another species for him, or not even a living species. I mean, he was that indiscriminate with it. But there are things like this that happen all over the world. There are Islamic doctrines, right? That there are Islamic theocracies that target Muslims regularly. In Yemen, right, there is a sectarian war, proxy war happening between Saudi Arabia and Iran with the Houthi rebels, and the Saudis are essentially massacring Yemenis. Okay, and it's not just with bombs and violence, but they're starving. If you see the pictures that are out of Yemen, there are little kids who are literally who haven't had anything to eat for, it looks like, weeks. So, I mean, what's going on over there? The pictures, I can't even explain. I'm having a hard time explaining how horrendous it is. I wish I could show pictures, but
it's the greatest humanitarian crisis of our time right now.
Right now, currently in the world, what's happening in Yemen.
And given the numbers, every time you go through the numbers of children, the amount of kids that are starving, the number of people that have died from bombing, the number of people that are being struck by disease because of this sectarian war between Shias and Sunnis with the backing of the United States and other European countries. Given the number, when you look at the numbers, it's so mind-boggling, and it's so weird that it's so bizarre that people are not talking about it. Like, the numbers are so crazy, and the Muslims are not talking about it that much because it doesn't serve the narrative, because it's Muslims killing Muslims.
It's Muslims upon Muslims,
and the non-Muslims are not talking about it. Even the because the Muslims are killing Muslims, they're not killing non-Muslims. They would be talking about it if they were killing non-Muslims. Strategically, it's not. They don't have oil. They're not in a strategic spot. People are selling weapons. Everybody's happy for this war to continue. Iran is happy for this war. Iran tries to make this war continue because it's making Saudi Arabia spend shitload of money there. Nobody. I mean, not nobody. A lot of people. Not enough people talk about it. Yeah, go on.
One other thing I want to point out is this isn't even a partisan issue. So, Yemen, the Saudi war against Yemen is supported by the U.S. It still is, even though there was this resolution that was
both
passed.
Obama and Trump, by the way.
Both Obama and Trump, yes. So this is actually supported by Obama.
Yeah, fuck them both.
He supported it, and so does Trump. They've continued to do it.
Again, this is what frustrates me. I'm against Trump more for this and against Obama more for this than anything else. Like this, what his tweets, grab them by the pussy, all this other stuff that people are obsessed over, is nothing compared to this. The United States is knowingly giving weapons to Saudi Arabia, knowing that they're being dropped on innocent people, knowing that they were dropped on ports as a way to use starvation against civilians. Starvation was used as a weapon against civilians, and United States backed all of that up, knowing that they were doing this. And we are saying
US weapons.
Yeah, and we were like, and we're against. I mean, this is why I can't even understand. I'm against Trump, but the people that are against Trump, I don't think they're against Trump for the right reason. They're just looking at tweets and laughing at them. But this guy has blood on it. Both Obama and Trump have blood. Yeah, but they're not paying attention to this real stuff. This is why you should be against Trump, and this is why you should be against Obama as well. I mean,
this would probably be a separate conversation, but I don't think that any of the other stuff is less real. I just think it's different. I think there are many different reasons to be against Trump.
Yeah, you could be, but this is a major more. Yeah. This is more important. Okay, this is way more important than any of those other stuff. And again, even though like Bernie Sanders, like I'm against all his economic policies. I know I'm going to lose a lot of fans for saying that. But I love him for at least being against this war. he called this out. He called this war out from the very beginning, right? So even though, I mean, I don't like any of his economical policies, I can appreciate the fact that this matters more. He's against people being killed for no reason. And again, this is not a conspiracy theory. We know why this war is happening, because it's selling weapons. It is. Yeah.
What's crazy about this is that it's recently they passed this. I mean, the Republicans came and joined, several Republicans, I think 12, came to join the Democrats in saying that they wanted to end this war in Yemen, and they actually went against the Trump position, went against their own party to say this. But they only really did that after the whole Khashoggi thing. Like, it took, like, you have, like, so many, like, countless people and kids being starved and bombed in Yemen for the longest time, and that was like, okay, well, whatever. But they killed this journalist, which is obviously a terrible thing too.
But to be a US resident.
Now it's time to act against Yemen.
See, this is a good point, because when you say this, when we say, like, oh, apparently millions of children starving was not good enough to call out Saudi Arabia and United States, but one U.S. resident being killed made the whole world pay attention. But when you say that, people think like you're dismissing the fact that it was a tragedy to kill Khashoggi. You're not. And it's the same thing with the New Zealand shooting, right? When I see the whole world getting united to, rightfully so, calling out the crime against the Muslims, the 52 Muslims that are killed in New Zealand. And like, okay, this is great. Good job, world, for you speaking out against this. But why can't we get the same thing when thousands of Muslims are being killed? Millions of children being starved in Yemen. Where is the unity in that? Why can't we get the same? I'm not saying we shouldn't have a reaction to the New Zealand. We should not. The reaction to the New Zealand attack shouldn't be there. It should be there. But why can't we get something similar? Why can't we get something similar for all these people being killed in Yemen?
Yeah. We have a super chat from Nusantara Rising. So thank you, Nusantara. Really appreciate it. The donation of $10. Online, she's saying, he's saying, online there is huge support for Assad, the Houthi, and the other anti-imperial forces. There is truth to Assad being preferable to Al-Qaeda because he's more secular. Same with Hezbollah versus Al-Qaeda. But thoughts on Houthi versus Al-Qaeda?
I mean, I don't know if Assad is a fucking monster. I'm not going to support Assad just because it's secular.
Yeah, same thing. But if they're saying like a Houthi versus Al Qaeda, I think that's a very easy. I'd support the Houthi rebels any day. Al Qaeda is a completely different thing.
But the Houthis are also pretty. Okay, yeah, Al Qaeda definitely is worse than the Houthis, but that's not. I'm not going to support the Houthis, right? I mean, the Houthis, I've seen so many videos of them. They have child soldiers. They go and pick. They
do. They're like Iran. It's an Iranian tradition, right? That's what Khomeini had. You had child soldiers.
Yeah,
you're right. I'm not going to. What are you going to choose?
Yeah, I mean, they go to schools and pick kids from take. Boys out of school to send in the front lines. Obviously, I'm not going to support them, but obviously Al Qaeda is worse than the Houthis.
I don't think that you have to support anybody necessarily with these things, Santara. Like, I don't like this idea that which side are you going to choose? Yeah, sometimes you have to choose the one side over the other.
Right.
But oh man, there are unfortunately people who are in positions of power, people who are politicians, presidents, and senators, and everything. They do have to pick sometimes the lesser evil, and it's got to be a terrible job. I have to say that we are privileged that we don't have to make those decisions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyways, guys, by the way, again, if anybody wants to donate to anything when it comes to like helping reduce some of the harm in Yemen, my favorite charity is Save the Children. So if anybody wants
I would.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've worked with them. Like Alishma and I have worked with them.
With Save the Children?
Yeah, not directly, but briefly, yes, we have. Like they have a big thing here as well. Like, I remember we did shows, we've performed at concerts, my brothers and I, for Save the Children and all of that. I mean, it's an amazing charity. They do great work.
Yeah. Go look them up. They do
many years ago. We should probably do it again.
Doctors Without Borders is good, too.
Yeah, that's very good as well.
Yeah.
And a lot of these charities, I think when you look at charities to donate to, charities are tough because a lot of them have tremendous overhead. And, you should be able to find this. I mean, Doctors Without Borders is actually one of my favorite charities. I think that's excellent.
And also another thing you could do is, like, to write to, I don't know, your Congress people and stuff and tell them that, the war in Yemen is fucked up, and if you should, like, you wouldn't be voting for them if they support it. Like, just do some, maybe that, I don't know, that should be something you could do, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I want to bring up, while we're on this, going back to one of our previous guests here, who's actually one of my favorite sort of rising ex-Muslim thinkers, is Haris Sultan. And Haris Sultan actually made news. I read about him in the Washington Post the other day because after the Christchurch shooting, there was a senator in Australia, Fraser Anning, who came out and he blamed it all on immigration. He's like, this happened because of immigrants. So obviously, they went and they got shot. He put out this just completely ridiculous, horrible, bigoted statement. And I just wanted to point out that people think Muslims, Christians, like a lot of them think that atheists have no morality, they have no conscience, they have no values, right? But Harris, together with another woman named Kate Ahmed, got together and started a petition, right, to pressure him out of office, right, to get him out of office. That is on the way to 1.5 million signatures now. The reason it's in the Washington Post and all these other papers is that this is now the largest petition ever in Australian history. It's ever been done. And it was started by, and it was against a senator who made anti-Muslim bigoted remarks. So to stand up for Muslims, an ex-Muslim man, Haris Sultan, and also an atheist woman, Kate Ahmed, they got together and they started the biggest petition in Australian history to stand up against anti-Muslim bigotry. So I just wanted to point out that as well. Another thing, Armin, did you see Imam Tawhidi was another guest here? Did you see his statement after the Christchurch attacks?
What did he say?
It was basically it was kind of refreshing and kind of different from his past statements. I mean, he also really, really strongly condemned Fraser Anning. He asked all of his far-right supporters who are celebrating the attack to unfollow him. He said he could have been in the mosques. He completely stood up for them. He did all of that. He seemed very sincere about it, but at the same time, I know this because, you met him and you interviewed him with Daniel in New York, right? And there's a video of that online for people who want to check it out. But it just seemed strange because when we had him on Secular Jihadists, we talked about how he praised Pauline Hanson. And Pauline Hanson is also sort of an anti-immigrant who said that all Muslim immigration should be stopped, that all Muslim immigrants are dogs, literally called them dogs and so on. So it was strange that he very vocally supported her, but now he was condemning Fraser Anning. I hope he's had a change of heart, and if he has, I think that's a great thing. So that's just more news out of Australia.
Yeah, I mean,
Mohammed Zakaria is asking. Yeah, sorry, Armin, you had to say something?
We had another super chat, by the way. You should read that.
Oh, also from the Santara Rising. Thank you.
Thank you.
At what does secularism beat Islamism? Even considering human rights, e.g. Indonesian election coming up, Hizb ut-Tahrir was banned for not being secular.
I mean, how much time do you have when it comes to what secularism beats Islamism? The fact that...
No, I think it's considering human rights. Yeah, so here's...
Okay,
yeah, go ahead.
So, I mean, religion is one disease, okay? And secularism means that you have gotten rid of one disease, but that doesn't mean that you can't be impacted by other disease just because you got rid of one disease. Secularism doesn't make you immune to other form of nonsense. It just makes you immune from religious nonsense. And a lot of, and that's a good thing, right? I mean, if you are immune to if you're immune to cancer, you can't, just because you're still able to get AIDS, that doesn't mean the fact that you're immune from cancer that doesn't mean that's not a good thing. That is a good thing. But a lot of people sometimes point to secular governments that are struck by another form of disease, like Assad, for example, is secular, but he's a fucking monster, right? We never claim that without religion, you cannot be struck by a different horrible ideology.
Disease.
Disease. You can be. But still, because secularism means that you're immune from one sort of disease, is still a good thing. But it's not enough, obviously. Yeah.
Yeah, and I have two quick things to say about this. The first one is that secularism does have, I think a lot of people in the West should understand, secularism has a different association for people who live in Muslim majority countries. For instance, a lot of the dictatorships were secular. The Shah of Iran, right? That was a secular dictatorship. The Kemal Ataturk of Turkey. Well, I mean, for functional purposes, right?
Yeah.
It wasn't.
Definition of secularism,
liberal, democratic.
Yeah, I mean.
Yeah, go ahead.
I mean, definition of secular they have of secular is different from what we have, because when they say secular, they mean, and government forces out, takes a position against religion. But when we say secular, we mean like everybody has an opportunity to express. We don't like the government. When we say secular, we mean government just be like, you guys just do whatever.
Separation of religion.
But when what Ataturk and Reza Shah did, they actively, like Reza Shah, for example, he made hijab illegal in Iran. And
Kemal Ataturk did the same.
Yeah, so that is not secular at all. If you actively,
over there actually they have both. So, for instance, with in Egypt, Mubarak was a secular dictator, right? Hafiz Assad, these guys were secular dictators. They never really banned religion or anything like that, but they just kept it very separate. Right. If someone got too religious, it was considered a threat. If someone wasn't religious enough, then they couldn't be manipulated. So they wanted a little bit of religion. So there is so they associate secularism a lot of times that it's a trigger word for them. It's associated with authoritarianism in a way over there. So there is a difference. The second thing I wanted to say was I like to frame these things in terms of what is being targeted. What do I value? I value democratic liberal societies. Okay, liberal as in not the party liberal, but democratic liberal societies. Anything that is a threat to that, I think, should be taken seriously. What has been a threat to that in the past?
Islam
has been a threat to it. Communism in the past, right, has been a threat to it.
And
recently, far-right authoritarian.
Also today, communism is also a threat to it today.
I mean, all of these things are today, but what we're talking about, like a major, actual, global threat to democratic, plural, open societies, has been secular societies. Communism in the past was a massive threat during the Cold War. Okay, then you've had Islamic fundamentalism. That's been a massive threat to it. Today, the rise of the far-right populist authoritarianism, that is a threat to it. So all of these things are things that I oppose. People, often wonder, they're like, well, Trump is for the Muslim ban and everything. Why don't you support Trump? Because, you're a critic of Islam. Now, that's a very basic kind of question. But I don't look at it that way. I look at it as, what do I value? I value open, plural, secular, democratic societies. What is a threat to it? Both Islam are a threat to it, and Trumpism is also a threat to it. So that's the way that I look at it. I look at it as the target that I am trying to protect, or the values that I'm trying to protect. So that's why it's secular. When we talk about secular, I mean I'm thinking of secular, democratic, liberal, not just secular alone.
You want to read?
There's Muhammad. You're going to love this. Muhammad Zakaria is asking, Armin.
What?
Why do you call it Islamic terrorism when these people never cite religion as their motive?
Wait, they do.
That's why I just wanted to see your face in reaction to that question. Of course they do. They say Allahu Akbar. ISIS.
I mean, they couldn't make it any more clear. I don't know.
They quote Surah 9, Surah Tawbah from the Quran. They have extensive passages in the Quran. Their charters, the
what do they have to do for people to start believing? I mean, honestly, if I was a Al Qaeda or ISIS terrorist, I would be frustrated by by the far left. Not the far left, but people are like, well, I mean, I'm telling you guys why I'm doing this thing, and nobody seems to take me seriously. Why do these people just read my lips like this? I'm telling you, what the hell? I mean, what is if it's not Islamic terror attack? Then what is it?
It isn't. So this is like the kind of thing. We're not saying that, Islamic terrorism, when you're calling it Islamic terrorism, you're just being honest. I don't want to use terms like Islamist terrorism or, whatever. It's terrorism that is driven by Islamic doctrine. It just is. That's a fact.
Are you sure this was not a joke? Because it doesn't seem like a serious question.
No. It seems like a serious question because they're also arguing later. Mohammed Zakaria, I just want to say that we do appreciate having you here.
Yeah, sorry.
That is a good question. And the reason I read out what you said is because I think it's an important point to address because a lot of times we feel like we've been talking about this stuff all the time. We feel like everybody knows it, but no, we do have to repeat these things a lot as well.
I mean, if you are being serious, can you tell me what do you think they are, if not Islamic? What are they then?
Yeah.
Give us an answer. Yeah.
So, Mars is saying, I think he was just being a troll. But I think, the reason I think it's a good question is because a lot of people ask this. They're like, what if they said that's Islamic? I just want you guys to go and Google the statement that ISIS put out after the Paris attacks. And it quotes surahs, it's the Quran front, left, center, everywhere. So, it's there. It absolutely is Islamic terrorism. That doesn't mean that all terrorism is necessarily Islamic.
Before I forget, sorry, go on. Can I just read to you an email that we got today? I'm supposed to go in Calgary. I'm flying there tomorrow for 2 speeches, right? In Calgary. One of them was supposed to be in a university. Let me see, which university? I think MRU. I think that stands for what? The Mount Royal University or something like that.
That's a nice name.
I don't know what it is, I think. I don't know. Oh, yeah, Mount Royal University in Calgary. And they just sent us an email this afternoon. And this is, they deplatformed. I got deplatformed from a university I was supposed to speak at. So, I mean, I guess we all have to be deplatformed at some point. I mean, this is... So this is from Greg from the university. He's the interfaith coordinator. And the email that they sent out, it says, in light of the shooting last week and the responses to the event we have received from students and staff, so they're talking about the event that I'm supposed to be speaking at. So in light of the responses to so it seemed like they got a lot of complaints about the fact that I'm going to be speaking there, right? So in light of the shooting last week and the responses to the event we have received from students and staff, we are going to have to cancel hosting your event with Armin on campus on Thursday. Sorry for letting you down on this. If you want to chat further about this, let me know. Greg, I'm not going to read his last name, but he's the interfaith coordinator at the university.
Yeah.
So that happened. Yeah,
I want to give a shout out right now to the University of Toronto in Mississauga, where I spoke in October, and they had the same kind of complaints. They did not want to do it. They wanted the whole event canceled. There were a lot of complaints from Muslim students, and they stuck to their guns. And one of the ways that they accounted for it is basically they said, okay, we're going to have one of our Islamic studies professors come and start the Q&A with you. That's the way they made the compromise, but they did not give up, and they did not deplatform me. So shout out to them, and I wish more universities would do that.
We got another super chat.
Oh, we did? Hold on, I'm not looking.
Thank you. We're getting so many super chats. Thank you, guys.
I think this is a good discussion. I think it's an important discussion too.
Nick Cano.
What is it? You read it out?
Yeah, it says it's for $5, I think, Australian dollars. Saying, what do liberals in the West who oppose Islam and the far right do now? Do we have to change our tactics following this terror attack? No, this terrorist attack? I don't think so.
Very good question.
Yeah.
No, I think it's a very good question, Norman.
Yeah. No, I agree that's a good question. My answer was no, we shouldn't change it.
No, my answer is a little more. I don't think we have to change what we say. I don't think we have to change our arguments or water them down or dilute anything. But should we change our tactics? Maybe not our tactics, but I think we should change our strategy.
How so?
Okay. I think that we should, like what you're saying, start calling out everything. Be more consistent. Be more conscious of it. A lot of times we said that why do we need the disclaimer that we're against this when we're talking about this? I think that now, if you want to reach out to people who are not convinced by you, and if you want to bring them over to their side, the people on the fence, then I think you do need the disclaimer. I think there's a lot in the mainstream.
But that's how we have been doing that always. That's not a change.
We have been doing that always, but there was a time, remember when we talked about it, we're like, why should we need a disclaimer? We should be able to say the truth the way we want to say it. We shouldn't have to preface everything with, well, we're not anti-Muslim, but this is what we think about Islam. I think it has become important in order to have an effect. It's become important to preface.
Ali, I actually think that we have been doing that more than that. Like people, we actually have, but we have talked about that. It's annoying that we have to do it. We've acknowledged that, But let me give you an example. Like, so after this terror attack happened, we came out and we called it as barbaric, even though it should be fucking obvious. But people come out, the people that are against us, are the one that accuse us of being anti-Muslim bigots. They say like, oh, you guys are changing your tune now that this happened. And I'm no, and I'm like, what the fuck are you guys talking about? We have, the interesting thing is that both Muslims and regressive leftists come after us and say like, oh, now you're calling this out now after the terror attack. Now, but they themselves have not been calling out, I mean, not most of them at least, the crimes that China is committing against Muslims. And we have been doing that consistently, right?
Yeah, or Yemen. We've been talking about Yemen many times.
We have been talking about anti-Muslim violence. If you adjust it per capita, more atheists have been talking about this than Muslims have. Because the Muslims are just mostly obsessed with whatever Israel and United States does, not what's happening in Yemen or what's happening in China. And if you want to talk about Muslims being wronged, we are talking about the places that this is happening the most. And these people on the regressive left and also these Muslims, they're so Western focused that this has completely gone under the radar for them. They don't even give a shit what China is doing to Muslims because it doesn't matter, because they only care about US politics or UK politics or the alt-right. Right? China is not the alt-right, so who gives a fuck what they do to Muslim? If it's not white supremacists fucking up Muslims, it doesn't serve their narrative because China is not part of their politics. If it's Saudi Arabia or Iran fucking the lives of Muslims, it doesn't matter. It has to be white supremacist. It has to be white supremacist because for them to care. Because that's how who they define as the greatest evil. The same way that Muslims are obsessed with Israel as the greatest evil, and they have completely focused on whatever this country does wrong, and it doesn't matter what other countries do wrong to Muslims. The regressive left has focused on what they this is a new religion, and the devil is the white supremacists. And the whole evil around the world has to fit into white supremacists, and if it doesn't fit into that, then it doesn't matter. Right? That's why everything that is bad in the world has to somehow be the fault of white people, and for them, if a white person, you might as well be just a white supremacist. It's so fucked up. Yeah, go on.
I think that we have to talk about, though, I mean, moving forward, like especially if this kind of thing happens again, and it becomes, I mean, we did have the Quebec mosque shooting, and we've had this kind of thing happens again. I think we do need to talk about finding a strategy, a messaging strategy, right, that is not only honest. Of course, it has to be honest. We can't like do what when they instead of torture they started calling it enhanced interrogation. We can't do that. But we have to do something that's honest and effective. Right? So when we talk, for example, about not using the word Islamophobia, right? There is a cerebral way to get at that. And that is that, Islamophobia conflates criticism of Islam that's legitimate with bigotry against Muslims. And we've all said that. And I think it's compelling, but it's still cerebral. But if we say something like, this is not, Islamophobia is a very mild, academic, clinical, vague term. Call it what it is. It's anti-Muslim hate. This is anti-Muslim bigotry. That's a stronger, more effective term. If you do that, then I think that there are more people who will be responsive to using that term, including people that we don't necessarily
Well, if you want to be more effective...
I'm just giving an example.
Yeah, but if you want to be more effective, you should be... every time you talk about white supremacists do something, you should be talking 100 times more about what China is doing to Muslims. Okay? And again, this white supremacist...
No, Armin, you should be talking about both. You should talk...
did I say... wait, did you hear what I said? Did I say you shouldn't talk about what white supremacists...
No, I'm not saying... No,
did I ever
every
say...
time you talk about this...
Yeah.
You're saying
did I
every
say
time
you shouldn't talk about white supremacists?
No, you didn't. No. But you're saying that every time you talk about one, you should also talk about the other one. And I think it's okay to focus on one thing at a time.
Not each individual has to talk about both. But on a global scale, right, there needs to be a bigger reaction to China than white supremacists. What China is doing to Muslims is a much, much greater problem than what white supremacists is doing to Muslims. What Saudi Arabia is doing to Muslims is a much, much greater problem than what white supremacists are doing to Muslims. The global reactions are not proportionate at all. At all. We have become obsessed with the minority white supremacist group because we have defined a new religion, and that's the devil, and everything has to fit that narrative.
But
we are making them bigger by doing this. We're going
to disagree on the same point we did in the beginning, in which I think that because of where the whole white supremacist thing is happening and where this white supremacist sentiment is rising, which is in the Western world, that is supposed to have a record of human rights and protections.
It's rising from very small to a little bit bigger, but still very small.
No, I don't think so. I completely disagree. I think it's rising. I think it's a global threat.
I didn't say it's not rising. Did I not say it's rising?
I know,
saying it's flying from small position to another small position.
Very small. I think I'm saying it's a global threat. I think it's becoming a much bigger thing.
It's a small global threat.
And
it's a global threat. It's a small global threat compared to the things that I mentioned.
I think it's a massive global threat, and the reason for that,
compared to the stuff that I mentioned, it's a very okay.
But it's not just about numbers. It's not just about numbers. Like I said, if there is somebody who busts into the Pentagon and does a terrorist attack.
I know that's an explanation, not an excuse. Again,
it's not
white supremacists. The harm that white supremacists are causing is nothing compared to what Islam is doing. It's nothing compared to what China is doing.
That sounds, Armin, you know what that sounds like? That sounds like people who die in car. So way more people are dying in car accidents and shootings because of guns than there are dying from terrorist attacks, right?
Well, they are. Yeah,
I know, but
I'm not dismissing the importance of people being dying. I'm just stating facts, okay? I'm not dismissing the importance of white supremacists as a problem. I'm just stating facts that when you say it, people get triggered when you mention it because
I'm just saying that I think it's more than just the number of people dying. There's an element of an ideological narrative. There's an element of a mindset that is spreading that can potentially cause a lot more damage when that one crazy person, for example, gets a nuclear bomb because of ideology.
Nothing that you said contradicts what I said.
Okay, that's cool. Let's keep it at that then. This is fun. This is the most I've disagreed with you in a very long time. All right. Okay, so we're just going to go through patron questions because we have like 6 minutes left.
Okay.
And I'm on the East Coast, so it's going to get late. Okay, so I'm going to... some of these we've been kind of picking out. I mean, there's a lot of this.
Yeah, there was one at the very beginning that...
if you find one you like...
Renzo left because he couldn't stay, but he wanted us...
Yes, can you repeat that?
Should Western countries put more effort into protecting Muslims and other minorities through their foreign policy, and how should they do it?
Through their foreign policy, yes. I think that Western countries, I think that we're talking about the Yemen issue. We're talking about...
I mean, does it matter if they're Muslim or not? I think people should be protected.
No, he's saying Muslims and minorities, groups in the U.S. should we protect more of them overseas through their foreign policy. That's what I understood. Yeah. And in that case, yes, I think. I think that Yemen is a disaster. I think the Afghanistan in the 80s was a disaster.
Well, I mean, before even trying to protect them, maybe stop harming them. Maybe before you get to trying to protect Muslims, first stop selling weapons to people that are bombing them, and then maybe you could start thinking about protecting them after. I think that would be a first step you could take. Yeah. That would do a lot if you actually just be like, hey, we're not going to sell weapons to Saudi Arabia because they're dropping it on innocent people. That's a very easy decision to make. It's actually our Constitution in the United States already has made that a criminal thing. So we don't even need to come up with any rules. Like, we're already breaking the law right now. We're already going against our own Constitution. So all we have to do is just follow our own Constitution. It's very easy. Just stop selling fucking weapons to authoritarian, barbaric regimes. That's all you have to do. Take that first step, and then maybe we could talk about what we could do to protect people.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to... Okay, so that was a Mohammed Zakaria question. A lot of this is just them talking to each other. So there was clearly a discussion going on with Mohammed and the rest of the crew, some of the other people here in the live chat. So I'm going through all of this. James Lowerman said that he agreed with me. James Lowerman, I agree with you too. That's great. I like that. I had to point that out on since we disagreed so much. Look, if there's any other questions, then
there was one person said not blaming their ideology for far-right extremists excuses all the rhetoric of their propagandists just because it's not codified.
Yes, I agree with that. I agree with it.
That's not what I said, though. I just said...
No, that's what you said. It's not codified. It's not in a text. Yeah, you didn't say it excuses it, but I'm not saying that's what you said, but I agree with that comment.
I'm not sure what you mean by that.
So okay. Bobby B is saying you got banned, Ali. Yeah, I did. I actually got... I'll tell you what I got banned for. I got banned for saying something about the Taliban. But the way that Facebook bans work is that there are all these groups on Facebook saying report anti-Islamic pages. So they'll come up and they'll see, like, I'll give you an example, people who have a lot of Pakistanis in their audience, like Alishba, like Abdullah Gondal, like Abdullah Samir. What happens is anytime they see something they don't like, they just get together in a concerted effort and just mass report it to Facebook, and their algorithm.
You got temporarily banned. Came back.
Yeah, temporarily. All of us have been temporarily banned.
Right.
So Alishba's gotten several 30-day bans. I've gotten like 24-hour bans. Like once got a 3-day ban.
I got a 30-day ban. Mike is saying white supremacy is a huge problem in Europe. Again, I just want to say, I'm not saying it's not a huge problem. I'm just saying relative, and I'm not saying it doesn't deserve to be a lot of, when I say this, people think I'm dismissing white supremacy as a problem, and I know it's easy to do that when you're trying to when you're saying that, because people just, I'm pretty sure people are going to take this podcast and say like, oh, Armin is dismissing the importance of how big of a problem white supremacy is. That's not what I'm saying. Okay, I'm just stating certain facts. Yes, it is a big problem. Yes, it needs to be addressed, but I'm just saying there are also bigger problems. If I say there are bigger problems, I'm not dismissing the fact that this is a huge problem. Just for one example, right? We have China putting Muslims in camps, Okay? This is the closest thing we have gotten back to Nazi Germany. You know, there are 1 million Muslims being held in camps in China. Yes, white supremacy is rising in Europe, but show me right now, where are the camps that white supremacists are holding 1 million Muslims in? Where is that happening right now? I mean, is it even close to what China is doing to Muslims? Is it even close? It's astronomically a bigger problem what China is doing to Muslims. Astronomically higher. But it's not getting nearly as much attention. Why? Because it's more about Western politics. Because for us, this is about left versus right. Rather than where are Muslims being harmed. It's not about where Muslims...
I don't think it's that.
It's a game between left and right. It's not about saving Muslims. It's not about that.
I think it's because China has an authoritarian government and people expect it like, oh, they have an authoritarian government. Of course.
Yeah, but we expect that from white supremacists. What did you expect from white supremacists then? We also expect white supremacists to be anti-Muslim bigots.
No, we don't, because Armin. We expect more from our own secular, democratic, open, liberal societies because we think that we are different from China.
You're becoming
China's putting them in concentration camps. Hold on. That's terrible. That's a terrible thing. But why should this be happening in our countries when we have gone past? We worked so hard. So many people in our history died. We went through so many world wars to fight this. We've thought we've gone beyond it. And why is it happening over here?
What are you talking about? Nazi Germany was how many years ago? We have still people that lived it. Like, this is not something that we completely changed.
Yeah, I know. It's recent. But the whole thing is that everything that we live in right now, like, we're not living in the man in the high castle that Amazon the show or the book, right?
I love that.
There was the alternate reality of we're not living in that. We have a different thing. So why is this stuff rising here?
Yeah,
so it's a threat.
Again,
it's a nostalgic.
That's an explanation, not an excuse. Okay, I understand. I understand that explanation.
It's an explanation and it's a reason. It's not an excuse. It's a reason.
It's a good explanation. It's not a good reason. I understand why it happens, but it shouldn't happen. I understand why this gets more attention, but it shouldn't get more attention.
I think it should. I think it should get at least as much attention.
Aren't you trying? Isn't the whole point of our activism to reduce harm? I mean, if you want to reduce harm, then you go and you have to bring attention for where most of harm is happening.
But again, Armin, most of harm depends on it's not just measured by the number of deaths happening. If you look at the Israel-Palestine
I'm not even talking about death. I'm talking about people being pulled in camps.
I know people being pulled in camps. It's not just, but the thing is that people being put in camps. Like 1,000 people are put in camps in China.
1 million.
Hold on. Okay, let's say 1 million people are put in camps in China, and then 1,000 people are put in camps in Washington, D.C. Both are the Chinese thing in numbers is much worse. It's a much more horrific situation. What they're doing is probably terrible. What is more newsworthy? What is more worrying for me is that it's happening in Washington, D.C.
Well, why?
Because it's happening in fucking Washington, D.C.
But you should care about more where... you should care about where most of the harm is happening. Not the fact that which one is closer to home.
Because you know why? Because there is also the potential harm. Why do we care more about people dying of Islamic terrorism rather than people dying in bathtubs, which are exponentially more than people who die in Islamic terrorism? Is because there is a mindset and an ideology behind Islamic terrorism. So the potential for it is a lot worse. So yes, there are loads of people who say, hey, people drowning in bathtubs is a much bigger deal than Islamic terrorism. No, it's not. Yes, it's killing more people.
But there's intention behind the China one as well. What are you talking about?
There is an intention, but that intention is expected in China.
It shouldn't be expected. Government. That's my point.
Of course it shouldn't.
If you say, when you say it should be expected, I say, yeah, and that's the problem. When people say, well, it's expected in China. I know, so... just like it will continue to be expected in China if our reaction is more based on what we're familiar with.
The disagreement here is about the nature of the comparison. I know you're not saying that white supremacism should be excused. I'm not saying that China should be excused. What we're talking about is the nature of the comparison. I don't think that these two things are comparable.
Okay, we're saying
I just don't.
I'm not saying, they're not comparable. One of them is astronomically higher and deserves more reaction.
Which is worse or which is worse. I think both of them are really bad and often at the same scale. And it's just not about the amount of...
I honestly think that most of the attention to the white supremacy is because is political points rather than saving people. Okay? Because if it was about saving people, we would... I'm not saying we shouldn't pay attention to white supremacy and the rise of it. We should. It's a problem. It's a scary problem. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
You know? I mean, I personally should be more afraid of white supremacy rising in the West. I'm not going to go to China, okay? And even if I went to China, nothing's going to happen to me, okay? But, I mean, if white supremacy becomes a big deal, I mean, I'm pretty sure I'm going to be a victim of it, like if they become powerful, so, right? So personally, I should be more worried about white supremacy rising in the West than China putting Muslims in camps, right? Personally,
well, anyway, we're gonna go in circles on this.
Yeah, okay. Go on. No, but I'm just saying that we're all in this together. Okay, this is one planet. We should care about our fellow human beings, even if they are on the other side. And
that part of it is not in dispute.
Okay, and I just think, again, people are going to think like I'm dismissing the importance of raising white supremacy. I'm not, okay? I'm not.
And I'm not dismissing the China thing either. So.
Yeah, and you're not, but you're also not claiming that I'm dismissing the importance of
No, I'm not claiming that at all.
Because a lot of people will. A lot of people think this is whataboutism. It's not whataboutism, because it would be whataboutism if I said we should ignore white supremacy because China. That is whataboutism. It's not whataboutism if you say, hey, white supremacy, a problem, we should protect Muslims against these bigots. Okay, sure, I agree with you. We should do that, definitely, 100%, go do it. Can we also pay attention to this monstrosity over here, please? That is not whataboutism, because you're just trying to be consistent. Okay.
Got it. Okay, so we disagree partly, but we do agree on the fundamental stuff. So there is I think this is I'm pretty sure it's a troll. I don't think he's serious.
Who?
This guy, David Knowles, he's calling you a lying Jew. He's also saying that America is owned by Israel and all of that stuff. So, so we got one of those.
I don't know if that's actually, it's going to be very hard to tell if it's a troll, because I've seen so many serious people like that.
Oh, there are serious people who think that, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking forward to all the Zionist conspiracy, because now I went to Israel and came back. I'm pretty sure a lot of people are going to have more pictures and stuff to use that against me, which is fun, actually. So keep them coming.
Muskal.
I accept that.
It's Muskal's birthday. Happy birthday, Muskal, on this day of recording. So, a very, very happy birthday to you.
Yeah,
and thank you for being, I know you've been in a lot of these live streams, so thank you. So, someone here said that I was wrong. Someone's telling me to get my neck x-rayed. I actually did, and I have a little bit of arthritis, but I'm getting it fixed. Thank you for the...
Are you going to be okay?
No, it's actually mild. It's completely appropriate with my age. Oh. I was actually healthier than I thought I would. I was hoping that I'd find something really crazy I could cure, but apparently not. It's just aging. So, I think that's...
that's about it.
I'm finding all this. Razib Khan is saying when atheists clash. Yeah, that's good. Mm-hmm. That's good. It's nice that we don't have just one thing to all stick to.
Yeah, I like the shows that me and you disagree on. It's much more interesting.
I want to plug Razib because I talked to Razib, I correspond with him quite a bit, and he does have a show. He has a podcast himself, and he recently interviewed Shadi Hamid. So Razib, I don't know when that's going to come out, but do check him out. And I was supposed to listen to that conversation today. I haven't, but I'm going to. Anyway, Lois, hi, how are you?
By the way, Lois, I mentioned she's the one that is arranging all my Calgary speeches and invited me, so thank you so much for that. And she's the one that told me about the email that we got from the university. But sorry for all the headache that I'm causing for this, because she's really trying to make it happen. I don't know what's going on. I haven't checked my emails because I'm trying to spend time with my dad. He's visiting Vancouver from Iran, so I don't know what she's doing, but I know she's very busy. So thank you so much for trying to make that all happen in Calgary.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Lois, if there's anything you want us to do, let us know. We love coming to Calgary, and I'd love to see you guys as well.
Yeah. And also let us know if we want to, like, the fact that the platform, the speech, if you guys want us to bring somehow more attention to it, that they did this, because this should be called out, I think, no?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
This should be called out.
Yeah.
Vincere saying good discussion tonight. Thank you. I know that Armin and I both disagreed with each other a lot. I'm pretty sure a lot of you I saw somebody saying that they completely disagree with me on this, and somebody else said I was 100% right, and I'm pretty sure that they felt the same way about you. But that's what this is about.
Yeah.
I mean, this is in the aftermath of this like pretty big tragedy that has a lot of people confused, and thanks to social media shitstorm, there's all kinds of narratives that people are trying to advance. So we just wanted to sort of parse through it as best as we could, which is what we try to give you here, as much as we can. So, and again, just a teaser. I'm probably going to promote this more than he is, but Armin came back from the Holy Land, from Israel and Palestine, and he went there with genetically modified skeptic Drew, a previous guest on this podcast, who had we had a great episode, and man, it's going to be amazing. I don't think anybody has done what you guys have done. So that's a teaser, and we'll do a live stream on it. We'll talk about it too.
Can I just let you guys know, one of the most interesting experiences that I had is that I wanted to go inside the Dome of the Rock, even though it was the hours that tourists can't go in there, but only Muslims were allowed to go at that time. So I had to pretend to be a Muslim, and I had an Israeli soldier making me recite the Quran for him to let me go see the Dome of the Rock. So it was a very weird experience that an Israeli soldier was asking me to recite the Quran. But a good thing is I have two surahs memorized, so I managed to pass and go.
Which ones?
Fatiha and Qul huwallahu ahad, Allahu samad, lam yalid wa lam yulad wa lam yakul lahu.
Easiest ones,
man. The short ones, but there was more than enough for them.
Surah Al-Qadr is the hard one. You should.
I went there again the second day. The second day, the screening process was harder. So they made me say 2 surahs and the Shahadat and 5 pillars of Islam. And they looked into my passport to see that I was born. I have a Canadian passport, but my Canadian passport says that I was born in Tehran. So they were I don't know why the second guy was very strict about making sure I'm a Muslim, which I wasn't. But I passed all the tests, and I went inside the dome that no tourists. I had Muslim privilege, so it was just very cool.
Muslim privilege. Well, speaking of privilege, were you able to secure some donations for the podcast from the Zionists?
No, I don't know what happened. I'm sure I would have met them there, but not. I don't know.
That's just never going to happen.
Never going to happen.
Anyway, everybody, all you guys, Uday, Mars, Beach, Soraya, Davin, our sort of anti-Semitic troll who's here, Nim, Grace, Lois, love you, Vincere, Muscal, happy birthday, Mars, Bobby, all of you guys. There's so many people here. I can't even name everybody. Ryan, thanks to all of you. Thanks, New Santera, for the super chats, and really appreciate it. And we have a lot of cool stuff coming up. So,
love you guys.
We'll see you next time.
See you guys.
Thank you. Bye.
The secular jihadists have been made possible thanks to the Illuminati and the covert support of Israel and the CIA. That's what we have been told, but we haven't received our checks yet. If you like what we do, please support us. Share the podcast with your friends. Write and tweet us with topic and guest suggestions. Or head over to secularjihadist.com and give $1 or more for exclusive access to live video. Have your questions read and answered on the air, and more. Till next time, may the flying spaghetti monster be with you.